Hello and welcome to the weekly takeaway, what you need to know from the news. This was quite a week for news. There are a lot of things going on, but if you've paid attention at all, you know that the big story this last weekend, Sunday afternoon, was the death of NBA superstar Kobe Bryant. Most people, whether they follow basketball or not, are familiar at least with the story of Kobe Bryant. Lakers basketball player, huge superstar in the world of sports and now entertainment, and continuing to develop really his own brand and his own empire. He, this week, along with his daughter, a total of 9 folks were killed in a helicopter crash. Just a tragic incident. So much has been said about this, and again, the first couple of days of this week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and even today, stories from folks who knew him and knew about him, and so many things around that. Not only was his daughter on the helicopter with him, and his daughter lost her life as well, but he left a wife and other children behind, and this impacted people in a very emotional way. It's always interesting when we see a sports superstar or a celebrity of some kind lose their life, particularly someone in their 40s like Kobe Bryant, because we don't exactly know how to respond, and there are a lot of different responses. What's very interesting about this is there is an emotional response. We think that there wouldn't be an emotional response to the death of someone that we've never met, but certainly in this case there was, and often there is, because we invest emotionally in their lives. We may not meet them personally, but we spend so much of our lives watching them do their work, whether it's performance or acting, whatever it is, we invest in them emotionally. And so when they, for some reason, lose their life, we take it very emotionally, as though we've lost someone close to us, someone we've invested in, a friend. And that's definitely what's happened with the loss of Kobe Bryant and the many other folks that were with him, folks whose names we'll probably never know. The big takeaway for me from this weekend, and there were many of course, but the big takeaway for me as I looked at his life was this. It doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter where you've come from or where you've come up from, it doesn't matter the reach that you might have personally, the money that you have amassed, or the value of the aircraft you're flying on. Everybody, every single person, everywhere, one day will come to the point where they end their life. They end their journey, or their journey is ended on this earth, on this life. That's something we need to keep in mind, not in a morbid way, but in a realistic way, because it helps to guide us as we move through our lives. It allows us to have this thought: what am I leaving behind? The death of Kobe Bryant, again, I don't know a lot about him. Many other people know far more than I do. But what I have learned is that he left a legacy behind. There is a generation of young athletes who have come up really watching him and modeling him and trying to pursue some of the same things that he did in his life. There are others that look at the charities that he was involved in and the other endeavors of his life that he was involved in, and they say that was meaningful to me, that meant something to me. He left a legacy behind. Now, we could argue the value of that, and that's not my point. My point is he lived a life that left something behind, something that others would follow and something that others could pursue. When we look at the death of someone that we care about, and particularly someone with the notoriety of a Kobe Bryant, we need to remember that all of us one day will take our last breath on this earth. It's going to happen. And when it does, we're going to leave something behind. Here's the question. Here's your takeaway. What are you going to leave behind? I hope that's a motivating thought for you. And that's the big takeaway from this weekend, at least for me. Other things happened this week in the news, and again, we're talking about the deaths of celebrities, but we know that it wasn't just celebrities, those folks that we know that lost their lives this week. In fact, in Afghanistan, we know that a U.S. Air Force plane crashed and 2 service members were killed. This is something we know happens kind of vaguely, particularly at this point in our history. We've been at war for the last 20 years, but because the news reports of those combat deaths and the service member deaths are really diminished, it's not on our mind all of the time. But the takeaway for me in this is twofold. Number one, we need to remember as a country, as Americans, that there's still a very real war going on, that there are very real Americans fighting that war, and that it's a dangerous place to be. There are service members in Iraq. We've talked about that a little bit. Service members in Afghanistan, of course, and we've talked about that a little bit. But we know this is still taking place. We need to keep in mind that there are service members deployed abroad fighting our wars, and there are the families of service members who've been left at home who are dealing with that, all while we're moving through our lives and really enjoying the freedoms that they are standing in the gap to preserve. Here's the takeaway. Every time I hear of the death or the injury of a service member abroad, there are very real people doing very real work to protect the freedom that myself and my family enjoy. The takeaway for you should be the same. There are people who are risking everything so that you could do whatever it is you're doing today. So that you could sit at your desk or sit on your couch and get on YouTube and watch a video like this one and then go on with your life. There are very real people who are making very real sacrifices to make that possible. We need to honor those who have served, not just on Memorial Day, those who have lost their lives, or on Veterans Day, those who have served and continue to serve. We need to honor those who stand in the gap for us every day of our lives by living lives that are worth defending. We remember today, and the names haven't even been released, but we remember today the 2 service members who lost their lives this last week in Afghanistan. Let's continue to remember them and honor them. Another big story this week, and again, how you take this story is up to you. I'll share it with you because it's news, and that's what we're talking about. But our president and the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, they this week presented a plan to hopefully, and this is a big hope, bring peace to the region of Israel, the country of Israel, and the region that encompasses Palestine. Now, again, your personal thoughts aside, the plan that the President of our United States presented was what we would call a 2-state solution. It's recognizing Palestine as a separate state under the governance right now of the nation of Israel. So it's a 2-state solution, but with certainly conditions. These conditions have been found not acceptable by many in Israel and many who call themselves Palestinians. It's a controversial, as you can imagine, controversial deal, and we'll see how it unfolds and what happens there. So much happening in the Middle East right now, and particularly in the nation of Israel. We know that our president is the first American president in history to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. We moved our embassy recently there. He's a staunch supporter of Israel and the people of Israel, and we're thankful for that. I believe that's the right way to be aligned. But as he seeks to broker a peace there, and a lot of folks have worked on brokering peace over the many years, we know that in a lot of ways, this is something that a lot of people have tried and many have failed. So we consider this and we have to ask the question, why has it been so hard to broker peace in Israel? The takeaway for me, and again, I hope for you, is this. We need to view everything when we're talking about global politics through the lens of history and ideology. History and ideology. These are difficult things for us to figure out. I think that most people could look at an example like Israel and ask the question, why has this been so difficult to figure out? It's difficult to figure out because this is a problem that spans thousands of years in this region. It didn't start in the 20th or 21st century or even before that. There has been conflict between the peoples that we recognize as Palestinians and Israelis for many thousands of years. Historically, this has been a problem that hundreds of people and leaders of both sides have tried to figure out, but it's one that meets a wall because of ideology. You see, these are 2 groups of people that look at the world very, very differently. And when we try to take 2 ideologies and put them together, we have to expect that there will be conflict. This is one of the problems I believe that Americans have generally. We look at the world outside of the United States and we place our ideology on top of folks who don't share that ideology. And then we wonder why things like immigration and these policies abroad and all of these things, why are all of these things happening? They're happening because we don't view the world the same way. And when we understand that there is an ideological difference between the Palestinians and the Israelis, an ideological difference that goes back for thousands of years, then we can better put in context exactly what's happening. I'm thankful that we have a president that's trying to navigate this issue, of course, and we've had other presidents historically that have tried to navigate these issues. By the way, both left and right, this isn't a left or right issue. Many folks over the years have tried to figure this out, and they've always come to a log jam, a place where they couldn't get past the personalities involved. While we hope that eventually these issues will be settled, we have to understand that in the context of history and ideology, there will always be some level of conflict. Let's not be surprised when it happens, and let's support those who are trying to bring peace. What an interesting story that is currently unfolding, and we'll see how it all comes together. We saw also this week, and this is another story with another takeaway. CNN host Don Lemon, if you watch the news, then you're familiar with this story. If you don't, then you can hear it from me. Don Lemon, he hosts a show on CNN, and he's well known on CNN. He was caught, I guess we could use the word caught, while on air laughing fairly hysterically as one of his guests started to demean, to tear down those who supported our president. I won't tell you all of the things that he said. If you want to find that, you can, because it's just about everywhere. But this host, who is supposed to be nonpartisan, we know that's not really the case, but supposed to be nonpartisan reporter of the news, started to laugh at the things that were being said to tear down the supporters of a sitting president of the United States. Things that would equate to calling them uneducated, not able to figure out what's actually going on in the world, and that's the only reason they would support our president. Now, whether you support our president or don't support our president is absolutely not my point. Whether you watch Fox or CNN or some other network news, it really doesn't matter to me. That's not the point. The takeaway for me from all of this is this fact. It's the fact that we live in a world where we find it okay, because of partisan politics, to plant our feet firmly on the left or the right, and then to disparage anyone who disagrees with us. We wonder why there is so much conflict in our country, why there is so much partisanship in our country, why people are so polarized, why there is really no middle. There is a left and a right, and it's often a far left and a far right. Why is it that we have found ourselves in this place in our country right now? Well, Don Lemon gave us a great example. The reason we find ourselves in this place right now is because we cannot have a rational, kind, thoughtful conversation with or about people that disagree with our point of view. We've come to the place in our country where it's okay to tear down those who see the world differently than we do, who share an ideology or a worldview that's different than ours. I believe that everyone in this country is entitled to believe whatever they want to. I'm thankful for the freedom of the press and the freedom of speech and the opportunities that we have to vocalize what we want to vocalize without fear of reprisal from our government. That's a sacred right in the United States. I'm thankful for that. But we need to be very, very careful not to take that to the point where we use the rights that we've been given to destroy those with whom we disagree. Because when we do that, we put ourselves on an island that has made it impossible for us to find a common ground and move forward together. So much of what we're dealing with in our country right now is because we've placed ourselves in a position where there is no alternative to our way. And Don Lemon, he believes apparently that that's okay. He gave a faux apology earlier this week, and it wasn't much of an apology. He's only an example of a much larger problem that exists on both the left and the right. Again, this isn't a right or left problem. But we need to be very careful to use the words that we use and the opportunities that we have to encourage, to build up, to find common ground, and when possible, to move forward together. And those are your weekly takeaways. A lot of things happened this week, and I hope that you're staying in tune with what's going on. But as you read these things and as you hear these things, be a discerning listener, receiver, consumer of the news. There are takeaways. They do apply to you. They apply to me, but they are not often found in the headlines. Let's get beyond the headlines, beneath the headlines, take those things away that apply to us, and move forward in our lives. If you're watching this, please, if you have not yet, like, subscribe, share this out, and we'd love to get this content to other folks. And we will talk to you next time. I hope you have a great weekend.